They set her bags on the pavement at 7:22 in the evening. 3 bags, 2 black nylon ones from the market, and a faded brown leather holdall that had been repaired along the seam with a needle and orange thread. Her son stood at the door and watched the houseboy carry them out. He did not carry them himself. He did not come down the 3 steps. He stood at the door in a pressed white kaftan and watched. And when the houseboy had placed the last bag on the pavement and gone back inside, her son said, "It is better this way, Mama. Adeze says so." Then he went inside. The door closed at 7:23 p.m. on a Thursday evening in November. In East Legon, Accra and Nkechi Okafor stood on the pavement outside her son's house for 4 minutes and 41 seconds before she picked up the 3 bags. She did not knock again. What none of them knew, not her son Emmanuel, not his wife Adeze, not the houseboy who had carried the bags and had not looked at her once, was that the woman standing on that pavement with 3 bags and no coat held the only key to something that was coming for their family like water coming under a closed door. Nkechi Okafor was 61 years old and weighed 49 kilograms, which was 4 kilograms less than she had weighed the previous November, and 7 kilograms less than she had weighed when she first moved into Emmanuel's house 14 months ago. She had not been sick. She had simply eaten less, not because there was no food, but because Adeze kept a precise inventory of what entered and left the refrigerator, and Nkechi had learned early that it was better to manage on less than to be watched while she cooked. She wore a blue Ankara blouse printed with small gold shapes that she had sewn herself from 3 meters of fabric she bought at Makola Market 18 months ago for 32 cedis and 50 pesewas. The blouse was clean. She had washed and pressed it with a heavy iron that morning while Adeze's children were still asleep, moving quietly between the laundry room and the outdoor socket so that the sound of the iron would not travel up the corridor. The blouse was clean, because that was the kind of woman Nkechi Okafor was. In 41 years of being the kind of woman she was, she had never once left a house without looking as though she had dressed on purpose. In the smaller of the 2 black nylon bags, wrapped in a yellow cloth that had once been a pillowcase, was a tin. The tin had been painted blue by someone in 1974, and the blue had worn through in places to show the gray metal underneath. Inside the tin were 4 things: a folded letter written in a handwriting that was not Nkechi's, a black and white photograph of a woman standing outside a building with no sign, a land certificate printed on green paper with a stamp from the Lands Commission of Ghana, and a dried piece of bougainvillea from a garden she had not seen in 23 years. She had carried the tin from Enugu to Accra in 1991. She had carried it through 2 rooms, 1 shared apartment, and 14 months in her son's house. She was carrying it now. She had raised Emmanuel by herself from the age of 4, when his father, Tobena Okafor, drove a borrowed Toyota to Abuja for a concrete supply contract and did not return. She had sold yam by the roadside on the Onitsha main market for 6 years. She had taken in sewing for a woman on the next street for 3 more years after that. She had sent Emmanuel to St. Joseph's Boys Secondary School in Enugu by saving 90 naira every 2 weeks inside a jar she kept under the loose board beneath the kitchen window. She knew the exact amount she had saved over 11 years because she had written every deposit on the inside of the jar lid with a black biro. The final figure, written in a slightly larger hand because she had been excited, was 42,890 naira. That money had paid for Emmanuel's secondary school fees, his wake registration, his transport to Accra, where he got his first accounting job at the age of 23, and a second-hand suit he wore to the interview for that job. The suit had cost 3,000 naira. She had pressed it the night before he left, the same way she had pressed her blouse this morning. Emmanuel Okafor was now 38 years old, drove a black Mercedes-Benz GLC with a cantonment's parking permit stuck on the inside left windshield, and had a house in East Legon with 4 bedrooms, 2 of which were used only when relatives visited from Enugu. Adaize had been Emmanuel's wife for 6 years. She was 34, worked in marketing for a cosmetics company on the Tema motorway, and had 2 children aged 4 and 2, who Nkechi had helped raise every day for the 14 months she lived in that house. Adaize was not a bad person. She had her own reasons. But the reasons did not change what had happened at 7:22 p.m. on that Thursday. Nkechi had one dignity she performed without fail in that house. She never sat at the dining table until everyone else had been served. In 41 years of being a guest in the world, she had learned to give people the illusion that they were doing her a favor. This was not weakness. This was the particular kind of intelligence that belongs only to people who have survived a long time without a net. She had spent 14 months in that house, not asking for anything she couldn't find herself. Now she stood on the pavement in East Legon with 3 bags, and the gate had not yet been locked because the houseboy had not come back to lock it. And she turned left because left led toward the main road, and she began to walk. The thing about East Legon at 7:30 in the evening in November was that it was the kind of neighborhood that did not notice a woman with bags. There were always women with bags in East Legon in the evening, domestic workers going home, traders heading back from deliveries, relatives arriving from or departing to somewhere. The security guard at the junction on 5th Crescent looked at her the way security guards in East Legon looked at older women with bags, which was to say he looked at the bags first, then at her face for half a second, and then looked back at the road. She walked past him. He did not speak. She had 43 cedis and 25 pesewas in the front pocket of her blouse. She had a small Nokia phone that Emmanuel had given her 2 years ago when she complained that she couldn't reach him. A phone that she had learned to use for calls, and one other thing that she had not told Emmanuel about. The battery was at 31%. She turned left again at the junction and walked toward the Matatu stop on the Boundary Road because the Matatu cost 1 CD50 and a taxi would cost 12, and she had 43 cedis. She did not call Emmanuel. She did not call Adaize. She sat at the Matatu stop on the metal bench that someone had placed there years ago, without authorization, and which the city had never removed. And she put the 2 black nylon bags between her feet and set the brown holdall on her lap, and she waited. She waited for 31 minutes. 2 Matatas came and went, and she did not board them. A man selling pure water in small sachets passed and asked if she wanted one, and she said no. Thank you, because she had 43 cedis and 25 pesewas. A woman with a baby tied to her back sat beside her for 12 minutes, and then a Matatu came for her route, and the woman got up and boarded it. At 8:14 p.m. Nkechi took the tin from inside the yellow cloth, inside the smaller black nylon bag. She held it on her lap. She did not open it. She just held it. The bus stop smelled of exhaust and roasted corn from a coal pot that a young girl was tending 20 meters away, turning the cobs slowly with metal tongs. The smoke going horizontal because of the November Harmattan wind coming in from the north. It was cold, the way Accra was cold in November. Not the cold that required a coat, but the cold that found its way into the gap between a collar and the back of a neck, and stayed there. If this story is hitting you the way I think it is, I need you subscribed before we get to what Nkechi does next. Because what she does next, what she has always known how to do, is the thing that no one in that house remembered to be afraid of. At 8:51 p.m., she boarded a Matatu to Osu and sat by the window. She had not been to Osu in 14 months. Before Emmanuel's house, before the 14 months, she had lived in a single room in a compound off Osu Oxford Street for 9 years, where the landlord was a quiet man from Volta region named Zigbordi, who never raised the rent more than once a year and always gave 3 months' notice. She did not know if Zigbordi still owned that compound. She found out at 9:17 p.m. when she arrived on foot from the Matato stop. Zigbordi's name was no longer on the gate. There was a blue padlock on the compound entrance that she did not have the key for, and through the gate she could see that the compound had been converted. The single rooms were now a storage facility for a hardware business, with steel roofing sheets leaning against the walls where her room had been. She stood at that gate for 2 minutes. Then she turned and walked to the junction and stood there. The harmattan had picked up, and there was dust in the air that she could feel at the back of her throat. The roasted corn smell from the Matatu stop had been replaced by something chemical, probably from the mechanics who worked the alley on the left. She had 27 cedis and 25 pesewas because she had spent 16 cedis on the Matato from the bus stop in East Legan and a bottle of water at Osu. It was now 9:24 p.m. on a Thursday. She was 61 years old and 49 kilograms, and she had not eaten since 12 o'clock when she had finished a small bowl of weki from the pot she had cooked for Adese's children. She took out the Nokia. Battery was at 14%. She scrolled through the contacts until she found a name she had not called in 4 years. Ama Owusu Boateng. She pressed call. The phone rang 7 times and Nkechi had begun to lower it when the call connected. The voice that came through was slow with sleep and then quick with recognition. Nkechi? Sister? It is me, Nkechi said. There was a pause. Are you all right? Nkechi looked at the gate with the blue padlock. I am looking for somewhere to sleep tonight, she said. The pause was 3 seconds long, 3 seconds in which Nkechi listened to the sound of a television being muted and sheets being moved. Where are you? Osu, near the Oxford Street junction. Stay there, Amo said. I am sending my brother. He will be there in 20 minutes. Nkechi said thank you and ended the call. Battery was at 9%. She put the phone away. She had known Ama Owusu Boateng for 31 years, from the time they had both worked as seamstresses in the same shop on Kanda Highway when they were young women. Ama had since retired and lived in a rented room in a compound in Labadi with her younger brother Kwadwo, who was 42 and drove a taxi and was a serious person. Nkechi had not called Ama in 4 years, not because they had quarreled, but because Emmanuel had asked her, quietly, in the way he asked her things, not to spend too much time with people from her old life in Accra. He had used the word embarrassing once, half in a sentence, and then moved on as though he had not used it. Kwadwo arrived in 19 minutes in a white Nissan Sunny that had no working radio and a cracked right side mirror held in place with electrical tape. He greeted her without asking questions, put the 2 black nylon bags in the boot, and waited for her to be seated with the brown holdall before he closed the passenger door. He drove with the concentration of a person who had learned to treat other people's silence as something to be respected. Ama was at the door when they arrived. She was 63, shorter than Nkechi, with hands that smelled of shea butter and the lavender fabric softener she had used for as long as Nkechi had known her. She put her arms around Nkechi in the doorway and did not say anything immediately. Then she said, "Come in. I have rice from this evening." Nkechi said she had already eaten. Ama said, "I know. Come and eat again." She slept on a foam mat beside Ama's bed. The mat was thick enough. Ama had put a folded kente cloth on top of it as a blanket, and the kente cloth smelled of cedar from the box it had been stored in. The room was small, 4 meters by 4.5, with a window that faced the compound wall and let in a strip of orange light from the security lamp outside. She did not sleep for the first 2 hours. She lay on her back with the tin on the mat beside her, and she thought about what she needed to do. Not what had happened, what she needed to do. By the time she slept, it was 12:34 a.m. And she had a plan. She woke at 5:50 in the morning and did not disturb Amma. She washed her face at the compound tap, dressed in the clothes from the day before, and sat in the plastic chair outside Amma's door with the tin open on her lap, the land certificate unfolded across her knees. The land certificate was green and smelled faintly of something old, like the inside of a drawer that has not been opened in years. It was printed on security paper with a blue Lands Commission of Ghana stamp in the lower left corner, dated the 14th of March, 2001. The name on the certificate was Nkechi Adesua Okafor. The plot number was 47LB91C. The location was Labadi Beach area, Greater Accra region. The size was 0.18 acres, which was 728 square meters. Her late husband Tobena had bought the land in 1999 through a cousin who handled small property transactions, paid for it in installments over 14 months, and transferred it into Nkechi's name in 2001, 6 months before he disappeared. He had told her, sitting in the small yard behind their room in Enugu, that whatever happened, this land was hers. Nobody can take a person's name off land, he had said. Not here, not in any court. She had not known what he meant then. She had understood later. She had not told Emmanuel about the land. She had not told anyone about the land. She had paid the ground rent by postal order every 2 years until 2019, when the Lands Commission had moved to an online system. And since then, she had used the thing she had learned to do on the Nokia, the one thing she had not told Emmanuel, to pay the ground rent online. 48 cedis every 2 years through her own mobile money account that only she knew the PIN for. At 6:15 a.m., Amma came outside with 2 mugs of Milo and sat in the other plastic chair and did not speak for 4 minutes while Nkechi looked at the certificate. Then Amma said, "Is that the land in Labadi?" Nkechi looked up. "You mentioned it once," Amma said. "Years ago. I never forgot." Nkechi looked at the certificate. "I need to know what it is worth now," she said. "And I need someone who knows how to find that out." Amma set her mug on the ground. "My neighbor's son works at a property office on the high street," she said. "He is a serious boy. He knows these things." Nkechi refolded the certificate carefully, along the original lines. "Tell me his name," she said. His name was Kofi Mensah, and he was 29 and worked as a conveyancing assistant at an estate management firm on Barnes Road in Accra Central. Amma called him at 7:31 a.m. and he agreed to meet Nkechi at 10:00 a.m. at the office. Nkechi arrived at 9:51 with the certificate and the original purchase documents that Tobena had signed and that she had kept inside the tin for 23 years. Kofi Mensah had a small desk in an office that smelled of printer toner and the particular kind of dust that gathers on old paper files. He was a quiet young man with reading glasses he kept pushing up his nose. He looked at the documents for 6 minutes without speaking, his glasses reflecting the overhead light. Then he set the documents down. "Madam," he said, "do you know what has happened to this area since 2005? She did not. He told her. The Labadi Beach area had been rezoned for mixed residential and commercial development in 2008. A secondary road expansion in 2014 had increased the value of plots along the eastern boundary of the estate. Plot 4791C was on the eastern boundary. 2 properties adjacent to hers had sold in 2022 and 2023. He pulled up the records on his computer and turned the screen so she could see the figures. She looked at the figures. She looked at them for 11 seconds. This is not land anymore, Kofi Mensah said carefully. This is a development site. With the proper legal process and the right buyer, this certificate is, he pushed his glasses up. This is a significant asset, madam. What is significant? She said. He told her the range. Low estimate. High estimate. With the right buyer, with the eastern boundary access and the commercial rezoning, the high estimate. Nkechi put both hands flat on the desk. She said, "What do I need to do?" She did not call Emmanuel. She did not need to. It was Emmanuel who called her. He called at 3:17 p.m. that same Thursday. Not the Thursday she had been put out, but 8 days later, which was how long it took for certain things to reach him. What reached him first was not a document, not a legal notice, not a letter from a firm with a name on a brass plate. What reached him first was a phone call from his mother's cousin in Enugu, who had been informed by a mutual connection in Accra that Nkechi Okafor had retained a property consultant and was in active conversations with 2 development companies about a plot in Labadi. Emmanuel called his mother's Nokia at 3:17 p.m. She answered on the 4th ring. "Mama," he said, and there was something in his voice that she had last heard when he was 9 years old and had broken a glass and was waiting to see whether she was going to be angry. "Emmanuel," she said. "Mama, where are you?" "I am in Labadi," she said. Looking at something. A pause. "Mama, Adeze, she wanted me to call. She wanted me to say that." He stopped. He started again. "We would like you to come back." Nkechi was standing on the eastern boundary of Plot 47, LB/91C, which was currently occupied by a stack of rusted zinc sheets that a squatter had been storing there for an estimated 5 to 7 years, and would be required to remove within 90 days under the development agreement. The afternoon Harmattan had dropped, and the sun was doing what Accra sun did in the afternoon, sitting flat and honest on everything. She could see from where she stood the roof line of a building 2 plots over that had recently been painted yellow. "Come back to do what?" she said. Another pause. "Longer, Mama, please." She did not say anything for several seconds. She looked at the rusted zinc sheets and the yellow roof line and the flat honest sun. "I will call you on Saturday," she said. "I have things to finish first." She ended the call. She stood on her land for another 23 minutes. What happened next did not happen the way it happens in films, where a single conversation in a living room resolves everything with tears and embraces. What happened was slower and more institutional, and because of that, more permanent. On the Wednesday of the following week, Nkechi Okafor sat in the office of a property development company on the Cantonments Road in Accra. The company was called Osei Mensah Property Partners. The man across the desk from her was named Al Danjuma, who was the director of acquisitions and was 64 years old and had been in property development in Accra and Lagos for 31 years. He had reviewed the documentation sent by Kofi Mensah's firm. He had done his own assessment. He was a large, quiet man who wore a simple agbada and had the kind of stillness that comes from having made a great deal of money without ever having needed to raise his voice. He placed the offer letter on the desk between them. He said 2 words, "Consider it." She picked it up. She read it. She read it again. The offer was for the outright purchase of Plot 47 LB91C, Labadi, Greater Accra Region, with vacant possession and full title transfer, for a sum that, in the 41 years that Nkechi Okafor had been the kind of woman she was, she had never once seen written beside her own name. She set the letter down. She said, "I need 1 week." Al Danjuma nodded. He did not seem concerned about the week. He picked up his pen and drew a small line under the expiry date on the letter. 1 week, he said. She folded the letter and put it in the yellow cloth. She put the yellow cloth in the brown hold-all. She shook Al Danjuma's hand across the desk, with both of her hands the way she had been taught, which was the way you shook the hand of someone you were going to do serious business with. She went back to Amma's room in Labadi and sat in the plastic chair and looked at the compound wall until the light changed. She went to Emmanuel's house in East Lagone on the Saturday, as she had said. She arrived by taxi at 10:12 in the morning because she had money for a taxi now. Kwadwo could have driven her, but she had wanted to arrive by taxi. The houseboy opened the gate. He looked at her face this time. Adeze met her in the corridor. She was wearing a white house dress and her hair was tied back, and she looked, Nkechi thought, as though she had not slept particularly well in 8 days. Adeze said "Mama" and stopped. She said "I am" and stopped again. Nkechi said "Let us go and sit." They sat in the living room, the three of them, Nkechi, Emmanuel, Adeze, at 10:17 in the morning with tea that the houseboy brought, and that no one drank. Emmanuel's 2 children were in the back of the house. Nkechi could hear the older one, who was 4, talking to herself in the corridor. Emmanuel said, "Mama," what Adeze said. When Nkechi said, "I am not here for that." He looked at her. She put the yellow cloth on the coffee table. She opened it. She took out the land certificate and the offer letter and placed them side by side on the glass tabletop. Emmanuel looked at the documents. He looked at the name on the land certificate. He looked at the figure on the offer letter. He looked at it for a long time. Adeze, who was sitting beside Emmanuel, said nothing. Her hands were in her lap and she was looking at the coffee table with the particular expression of a person who is recalculating something. "I need you to know 2 things, Nkechi said. She said it quietly. She did not raise her voice. The first is that this has always been mine, since 2001. I have always known it was mine. I have always paid what I needed to pay." She looked at Emmanuel. "The second is that I am not asking your permission for what I do with it." The 4-year-old's voice had stopped in the corridor. The house was quiet. Emmanuel's hands were on his knees, and he had not moved them. Nkechi picked up the land certificate and refolded it. She put it back in the yellow cloth. She left the offer letter on the table. "I am going to accept this offer," she said. "And after I accept it, I am going to use what it provides to live as I choose, for however long I have." She picked up her hold-all and set it on her lap. "I have not decided yet whether that is in Accra or in Enugu. I may go to both." She stood up. She looked at her son. His face had done something in the last 10 minutes that she had not seen it do in a long time. It had become young again. Not young in a good way. Young in the way that faces become when a person discovers that they were wrong about something they thought was settled. "Mama," he said. "Please." She put her hand on his shoulder. It was a brief touch, not angry, not warm with relief. Just the touch of a woman who had raised a man from 4 years old and knew exactly how much she had paid for that and was not confused about any of it. She said, "I will call you." And she walked to the door, and the houseboy opened the gate, and she got into the taxi that was waiting on the pavement where her bags had been set on a Thursday evening 8 days ago at 7:22 p.m. And she left. Emmanuel Okafor did not lose his house or his career. Adeze did not leave him. Their children grew and were fine. These things did not collapse, because the story was never about collapse. It was about knowledge, who had it and who didn't, and what that difference eventually produced. What happened to the family in the years that followed was subtler and therefore more permanent. Adeze went quiet for a while, in a way that was not resentment, but calculation. Emmanuel became a man who answered his phone on the first ring when his mother called, and continued to answer it that way. The houseboy who had carried the bags out was replaced within 3 months, not by Akechi's instruction, but because Emmanuel could not look at him without feeling something he did not have a word for. Nkechi accepted the offer on the land on the following Friday. The transfer was completed in 2 months. She did not tell Emmanuel the exact figure. She did not need to. He knew the figure from the offer letter she had left on the glass table. He had looked at it after she left, and his wife had looked at it too, and the number had done its work without anyone having to say anything further. She rented a clean 2-bedroom flat in Lebon, 3 kilometers from the sea, with a small balcony that caught the morning light. She bought a proper bed with a firm mattress and a headboard made of oiled wood. She bought a sewing machine, a good one, not the second-hand kind, and put it by the window with the best light. She sent Amma a new mobile phone and paid 3 months of Quadwo's fuel costs without explanation. She cooked for herself every morning, wakey on Mondays, eggs and bread on other days. And on Fridays, she made a pot of palm nut soup the way her mother had taught her in Enugu, slowly, with the patience that the recipe required and that she had always had. She ate it at her own table, at a time of her own choosing, in quantities that suited her, and she ate it all. The world does not always recognize what it is standing in the presence of. It makes its calculations on what it can see: the bags, the blouse from the market, the coins on the counter, and it feels certain. It has made this calculation 1,000 times before, and will make it 1,000 times again, and most of the time, nothing corrects it. Most of the time, the person with the bags simply leaves and the door closes, and that is the end of it. But some people have been carrying things for a very long time, not because they were waiting for a moment to use them, but because certain kinds of knowledge cannot be taken, and certain kinds of preparation cannot be erased, and what looks like nothing is sometimes the one thing the world should have been most careful with. You cannot erase what a person carries inside their hands. You can shut a door on them. You can send the houseboy out with their bags. You can stand in a white kaftan and watch from the top step and say the words you have rehearsed. But the ground does not change. The certificate does not stop being in the name it is in. The tin does not stop holding what it holds. What has been built by 41 years of a certain kind of living does not disappear, because a door closes. And the night Emmanuel closed that door was the last night in which he had any certainty about his mother. Because while he was turning back to his life and telling himself that it was better this way, she was already making the only phone call she needed to make, and the taxi was already driving through the East Legan Gate, and what waited on the other side of that night was a life entirely her own. If your mother gave everything she had to raise you, years before you had a career, before you had a house, before there was a life to be embarrassed about, and someone convinced you that she was the one who had to go, would you recognize the moment? Not the moment after, the moment. And if you got it wrong, would you have the courage to face what you had done, not in words, but in the slow, permanent work of becoming someone who deserved the phone call she still made on Saturday morning? Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.